Welcome back. I'm Khaled Ben David.
And I'm Nareeb Ben. Today, on the 50th anniversary of the Six-Day War, right here in Israel, a group of the country's former top brass gathered in Jerusalem, taking stock of mistakes made, lessons learned, and maybe most importantly, what's ahead for the Middle East. I sat down there with Lieutenant General in the Reserves Moshe Yaalon, former IDF Chief of Staff and former Defense Minister. Here's the first part of that interview. Moshe Yaalon, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
So we're here taking stock of a war that redrew the map of the Middle East, that changed Israel's course politically, socially, militarily. What do you think is the most important lesson learned in the Six-Day War that's actually still relevant now?
The most important lesson is that the border lines of the 4th of June 1967 were not defensible borders. And of course the outcome of the war brought about a great change, a relief. I was 17 years old at that time, feeling the anxiety of whether we are going to survive this war or not. And of course, after the war, it was a great relief. I believe that Lieutenant General Rabin at that time, Chief of General Staff of the war, learned this lesson in a way that even when he decided to go to Oslo, he said that we are not going to withdraw to 67 line. It's a great temptation to the Arabs as lines to attack us. So this is my great lesson as well.
In terms of threats, we often hear about the threats from Iran, from Hamas, from Hezbollah, from Syria and the war next door. What do you think is the most important threat for Israel to deal with today, 50 years later? Is it outside Israel or inside?
Existential threat is the Iranian aspiration for military and nuclear capability. And it is a combination of religious ideology, political ideology, with the idea to wipe Israel off the map of the earth. It's still valid. Now we enjoy a delay in the project, in the military and nuclear project, but this is a delay for a short while, for not more than a decade. Having said that, they still have the ambition, first of all, to gain hegemony in the region, and in a way, because of certain mistakes of the former US administration, which demonstrated weakness, they succeeded in gaining hegemony not just in Tehran, in Iraq vis-a-vis the Shia government, in Damascus by supporting Bashar al-Assad, in Beirut vis-a-vis Hezbollah, and nowadays in Sana'a, in Yemen as well, supporting the Iranian proxies, the Houthis, and having a terror infrastructure in 5 continents. But the main element that they still aspire to acquire is a military and nuclear capability, and this is the main external threat.
And inside?
Inside, you know, we have to fight internally against bad winds, I would say. But Israel is vibrant, hopefully vibrant democracy. I do worry about certain elements like extremism generating hatred against sectors in our society, harming checks and balances in democracy. That were my main reservations, actually, when I decided to resign from the government. And that's what I wish to deal with in my current capacity, having an NGO to deal with it. But I believe that the Israeli society is vibrant, and I believe we will overcome these internal challenges.
If we're looking back then again at the Six-Day War, 50 years ago, we're talking about a massive political change, sort of a new lifting off point for the right wing, for the settler movement that started after that war. How do you think politically Israel has changed?
There is no status quo anyhow, anywhere. And yes, it is a change. Positive changes and negative changes. This is the way to live and to deal with internal developments in a democratic society. Yes, it is a struggle about values. It is struggles about the values of democracy, the Jewish values, and so forth. But I do believe that we have the power, especially talking about our young generation, to meet these challenges as well.
After the Six-Day War, what do you think should have been done, if we're to play a game of hindsight, with the West Bank and Gaza, knowing what we know today about Israel's challenges?
At the beginning, the political leadership at that time actually declared that the territories which were gained in the Six-Day War might be a deposit for a peace agreement. That's what we did with Sadat, Menachem Begin and Sadat, with Egypt, giving up Sinai in order to have a peace accord and peaceful relationship with Egypt. We have reached a peace agreement with Jordan, even strategic relations, even without giving up any piece of land. And it was done actually in 1970 without signing peace accord because of interest. We failed to make it with the other. We tried, of course, to do it with the Palestinians, and we failed. We believed in land for peace, and it had become to be land for terror with more than 1,000 casualties, or land for thousands of rockets, talking about Hamastan in Gaza. So the whole situation has been changed. And today, giving up land without assuring our security is going to be disastrous to our future. And this is a bad experience with the Palestinians. It will take time. I still believe in what Jabotinsky called the Iron Wall. At the end, historically, and we can look at it in a broader perspective, those who use the term the Israeli-Arab conflict are irrelevant for meanwhile. I believe it for a long period of time. Why? Because with the Sunni Arab regimes in the region, we share common interests, not talking about common enemies. Iran is our common enemy. Of course, global jihad elements like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, our common enemies. Muslim Brotherhood, for us Hamas, for Egypt, internal enemy, and Hamastan in Gaza, external enemy, and so forth and so forth. So I believe that the Six-Day War had become historically to be the turning point in which the Arabs have to leave the idea, to abandon the idea of eliminating Israel by conventional type warfare, and part of them, of course, cooperate with us. Those who are still our rivals and enemies try to harass us by terror, rockets. This is not an existential threat so far. It might be an existential threat if Iran will acquire military and nuclear capabilities. That's why I consider Iran as a main threat for the future.
Do you think that the notion of land for peace is still relevant? I mean, after the Six-Day War, for example, there was some conversation, as you mentioned, of trading land for peace, for recognition by those Arab nations. Today, when we hear about a new alliance with the Sunni Arab nations led by President Trump, can you envision that happening?
It is irrelevant as regard to Syria, looking to the internal situation in Syria. So, and you know, it is irrelevant. The main issue is the Palestinians. Now, we tried very hard, and our experience is very bad. Any piece of territory which was delivered to Arafat at that time had become to be homicide bomber's launcher. I had to deal with it as a chief of general staff. And in Gaza, after the implementation of the disengagement plan, it has become to be a rockets launching pad with Iranian know-how, with Iranian weapons, and so forth. Can we afford it in the coming future? So it will take a long time, a long period of time, to have any kind of understanding with our Palestinian neighbors. That's why I claim there is no chance for final settlement from one hand. On the other hand, we have to make our own decisions to avoid binational state.